just to give you a bit of an overview of how the health check came about, it was developed by Transition Network and Oxford University. There was some grant funding that we got in order to do that. So there was a lot of thinking behind what is sort of quite a simple tool, but actually there was quite a lot of complex thinking behind getting it in the structure that it is now for groups to use. And then it was also tested with a lot of transition groups in the international movement, and then tweaked and refined in order to make it as useful as possible. And so what we see the tool as, what the idea of it is that it's there to help your group come together and analyse what's going well, and then also identifying areas that may be more challenging or stuff that you could develop in order to make doing transition easier in your community. One thing that to make very clear about this health check tool is that it's not a test. This is not like you fail or you pass sort of activity. The main point of it is to help you reflect really on what you're doing in your transition group, and where there might be some gaps or where there might be some challenges, and getting you to think a bit more deeply about that. And what we found is one of the best things about the health check is that it's an opportunity for your group to come together. We recommend about once a year, although you can do it as often as you want, in order to sort of look back over the year and to sort of reflect on what it is you've achieved over that year, what was successful, what was a challenge, what went really well, in order to sort of take that information and feed into how you're going to plan the year ahead. And it also, what we found is that it can highlight things that to have, we always like to think that people would have some form of celebration at least once a year. So when you're doing a health check, if there are things that come out, you go, yes, we did that really well this year. So it's a really good tool for like really thinking about what you've achieved and celebrating that. And one thing that we found about that is that it's quite rare that a lot of groups in general do that sort of thing, mainly because we have the tendency to want to move quickly on to the next thing rather than reflecting on what we've done and what we've achieved in the previous year. So that's sort of an overview of the bit of the history. And so just to elaborate a little bit more on the purpose, that it's sort of been designed in order to enable the group to reflect on what's been working well, what could be strengthened, as well as what isn't working and needs to change. And in order to do that, it's there to prompt conversations. So it's not like when you see the structure of it, you'll see that you give a score to each section of the health check, each statement within it, you'll see that. But the point is not to just go through and go, well, we did really well on that bit, that's a 5, and then the next bit, that's a 4, and then you've sort of done the health check in quarter of an hour. The point is that it's there to stimulate conversation and to unpick what you've actually been doing and what's been going well, and why that was going well, or why it was a challenge, and what was challenging about it. So it unearths what may be unseen dynamics, or gives people an opportunity to reflect properly on what's been going on. So it also, as I was saying, it enables you to celebrate your strengths, your successes. And we would also say that, it's also an opportunity to celebrate failures, because failures are we always see them as actually good learning experiences. It's the fact that you've tried something and it didn't work means that you wouldn't do it the same way again. So it's definitely like a learning process. And then what we hope is that once you've gone through the whole thing, then when you're planning your work ahead for the following year, that it then influences what next steps you might take. You have more clarity about what you could do again, which worked well, or what you might need to change and tweak in order for it to be more successful. So that's sort of what the sort of the purpose of it. So now I'm going to quickly go on and talk a bit about the structure. And the structure of the house check is based on this thing called the transition animal. And I'm just going to get up a picture of it so you can see. So hopefully everyone can see that. Now we're sharing my screen. So the transition animal, in this case, it's a deer. And that's mainly because I grew up in the Forest of Dean in England, and we have a lot of deer around us. So it can be any animal. We recommend that people, adapt it and into the animal that they like the most. It's really a metaphor for what we see as a healthy transition group. So each of these areas that you can see around the animal, like reflects and celebrates, vision, having fun, healthy group, networking and partnerships, practical projects, community involvement, part of the movement, they all come from our experience of transition in many different contexts, cultures and countries. And they are what we found make up what we call the 7 essential ingredients that help a transition group to be successful. You'll see that there's more than 7 there, but we don't class, some of them come under each other. And so if you think about each one, it begins to make more sense. So like if you look at the legs, you have the healthy group, networking and partnerships, practical projects and community involvement. And they are the practical things that help develop transition in your community and move it forward. So if your group's not functioning well and there's a lot of conflict within it, and you're finding it difficult to meet, or or there's any kind of problems within that, it's very difficult to move transition forward. In order to develop transition in a community, you need to have involvement with the community. And a lot of the ways that you do that would be through running practical projects and through working in partnership with other groups and networking within your community. So they're the things that move it forward. Secondly, if it's really useful to have a clear vision. Hence, you can see vision is quite near to the animal's eyes. And that's, we think that it's really useful if your group has sat down and thought about what it is they want to achieve and how they're going to get there by utilising, practical projects involvement and what's community involvement and what sort of thing is you're hoping to achieve. Then we have reflects and celebrates, which part of the health check sort of fits under that sort of area, is that it's an opportunity for then, to always be thinking about what you've done, how you've done it, has it worked, and celebrating that fact. And then having fun, which also comes under reflects and celebrates. We've put it near the mouth because I think it looks like the deer's smiling. So we think, it's very important that transition, definitely has an element of fun within it and that people enjoy what they do. And then we've got inner transition. And inner transition is sort of above roughly where the heart might be. But it's about the inner transition is sort of embedded within nearly all of the others, in the sense of that it's sort of about how we create this new culture or new way of doing things that we want to see happening in the world. And a lot of that particularly through, starting with our own group and making sure that, people, that it's a healthy and productive and fun place to be. So inner transition is sort of embedded within all of it to a degree. And then the animal is situated in the part as being part of a wider movement, hence part of the movement sort of being the context that it exists in. So just give me 2 seconds. So that sort of then reflects the structure of the health check. So each one of those, but we've also included actually a how to start transition, developing your initiating group section as well within the health check. So I just go through the structure of the health check is that we have how to start transition, developing an initiating group. Then there's healthy groups. Then there's vision. Then there's community involvement. Then there's networks and partnerships. Then there's reflect and celebrate. Then practical projects. Then inner transition, and finally being part of the wider movement. And each one of those areas in the health check, which I can just change the screen so you can see. Give me 2 seconds. Each one of them has a series of statements and a pie chart below it. So the pie chart looks like this. And each statement, you then score yourself out between 1 and 5 on how well you're doing. With 1 being that this is something that we don't really do or something that we struggle with, up to 5 being this is something that we're really good at and something that we feel we do really well. I'll just give you it. Just find an example now of what the statements look like for you. Okay. So this is an example of what the statements look like for a healthy group. So as you can see, they're just quite general statements. They're there really to prompt conversation and for people to sort of explore a bit. So, so for example, number 1, our group has clear and agreed aims and objectives. And it might be that people have never had that discussion about aims and objectives, but there is sort of a common feeling that people are moving in the same direction. In which case, it might prompt the conversation to the group to begin to consider is that are we all on the same, are we all thinking the same? Do we all have the same aims and objectives? Would it be useful to write them down? Is this something we want to explore a bit more? And the same thing as you go down the list, there's stuff like members are clear about their responsibilities and roles. We have effective meetings with a clear agenda, discussion and minutes. We spend time in our meetings reflecting on how we work together, which is sort of more of like the inner transition aspect of healthy groups. We have discussed and come to agreement about how power and leadership work in our group. So there's a whole lot of things within that can be unpacked and thought about. And one of the things to be really clear about is that you'll find that the health check probably raises a lot of questions when you're doing it. And we're not saying that you have to have a code of conduct or you have to necessarily have agreed processes for making, recording and following up on decisions. But what we think is useful is that at least you've thought about that and had that discussion around whether this is something that your group wants to do or not. So that they're there really as prompts and more to get people to think about, are these the sort of things that we want? That being said, we have found that groups that do put structures in place or do have these sorts of things there function a lot better and tend to have less conflict, particularly in this healthy group section. They tend to have less conflict and less problems because people have had those initial discussions up front. So when something happens, it's definitely like there's been agreement around how things are done. So just going to stop sharing that. Okay. So there's a few other bits that I just want to talk about. Is that the health check itself is there is once you go through the whole thing, you'll find that you may have scores lower than you think, and some will be quite high, and it will begin to get you to think a lot about how the what it is you want your group to do and how to move forward. And this is where, again, where we would say that we wouldn't expect your group to be scoring, 5 out of 5 for everything in the health check. In fact, we'd be quite worried if that was the case. So it's more about like having a holistic view of how your group is doing, and hopefully the health check will enable you to maybe think a bit about stuff you might want to work on a bit more, or stuff that you might want to repeat the year coming, or raises more questions about how, where you might want to put more effort in, or the fact that, we maybe want to think about rethinking about our vision, or we might want to do more community involvement. So that I think you'll find it probably raises lots of questions, and it's up to you as within your group to decide what with that information. And one of the things that we found can be useful is if you've got someone from outside your group who would come in and help you and help facilitate doing the health check, can be quite useful, because they can be, as an external person, they can question how you're answering it and pull out more information. If you're all sat around in a group, there's a lot of assumed knowledge, whereas just having a thing about, sorry, I just got a message from Don. Okay. Sorry. So it's more about you taking that information and deciding how you want to move forward with it. And like I said, having people externally come in and do it and help facilitate that can be really useful. Whether, sometimes if you're nearby to another transition group, maybe one person could go to the other group and vice versa, and help facilitate it and go through it. And that way you get to hear about how different groups are approaching these different areas within the health check. Once you've done the health check, it sort of relates to all the areas, all the different areas I talked about, the healthy groups, vision, community involvement. We have a whole range of support resources on the Transition Network website. If you just go to Transition Network, do transition, and you'll see the 7 essential ingredients. And under each of those essential ingredients, there's there's probably about 40 resources all in all, which can help you with decision making, with running events, with how to involve the community more, how to set up networks and partnership. So there's a whole range of resources there for you to use. And we try to make sure that everything links in together. So you get the transition animal, which links into all the categories of that, link into the structure of the health check, and then the health check links into what we call the support offer that we have on the Transition Network website. So everything is quite easy to find and navigate, and hopefully, makes it a lot easier for you to address any issues that you'd like to look at. So there's a sort of a clarity to the whole thing.